the name of the strand. The name of the strand is composition. So we can easily default and say, this is the writing strand, except in the knowledge and skill statement, as with all of them, it says composition, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking using multiple texts. So we're going to start in the writing process. But keep this in mind. If all 5 of those domains in English, listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking, are in the composition strand, the writers of these strands are telling us ELA must be integrated. So to split reading and writing between 2 teachers is not anything that these standards support. Statewide, K to 12, 4th grade and 7th grade, we're just going to say it out loud, you can't separate in any grade reading and writing, and putting them together simply makes sense. And these strands are integrated, and therefore we must read and write together, and listen and think and speak as well. So let's start with the knowledge and skill statement. The student uses the writing process recursively to compose multiple texts that are legible and use appropriate conventions. I look at this and it says the writing process is used recursively. How does that affect instruction going forward now?
This is something that we're going to focus on in every piece of literature, even if we have not personally written it. How did the author set that text structure up? What punctuation did they use? Why did they use that punctuation? How can we then carry that over into our own personal pieces of writing and planning and drafting and editing and revising? This is something that we're going to have to integrate into every piece of literature that we pick up. No longer, this is my 45-minute writing block, this is where I'm going to focus on writing. You can't. With that author's purpose strand, it really builds in that segue of this is why and this is how, and then this piece takes it to personal application, making sure that the kids can do it on their own.
So I want you to look at the writing process standards, but it's a different writing process that we had in the 2009 adopted standards that we're currently teaching under. How does choosing your own genre affect writing instruction in the class?
As a former 4th grade, 5th grade teacher, when I started, it was, these are the prompts that we're going to use. Let me teach you how to write to this prompt. That's gone. If we're going to give choice in writing, then we can no longer teach to a prompt. We need to teach writing as a holistic skill. You need to be able to write about your ideas, your thoughts, no matter what the prompt is. It must be a skill that has longevity. So we're not teaching to a prompt anymore. We're teaching how to be a successful writer.
Whenever my 6th through 8th graders are trying to communicate something, I notice that their fluency is a lot better when they're composing, when they're writing, when they get to choose their vehicle of composition, of genre. And so fluency becomes a little bit of a non-issue because kids have a lot to say, and if they express themselves through a poem or through a fictional story or you know, an informational text, then that becomes their way of communicating with me. So I think teachers should be excited by the fact that kids are going to be more engaged because they have a choice in which to communicate with me.
Also, when we're thinking about kids with composition and writing and all of that, you also have to take into account that right now they have more access, and we've talked about this many times before, they have access to multimodal, like information is being given to them in many, many different ways. And it's ways that we never dreamed of when we were coming through. And I think it's really important for them to be able to choose. So how is this going to look? What looks familiar to me? How have I seen something presented? And it kind of blends itself back to that strand 5 with authors' craft. I mean, they're having to make these decisions. Who am I as a speaker? Who am I going to be talking to? And what do I need to be telling them about?
When we talk about composition, one of the things that I know that I work with young writers with a lot is composing pictures, composing illustrations, looking very intentionally at what other illustrators have done, because everything they do, just like a writer of words, is done for a purpose. They use color for a purpose, to set a tone or a mood. They develop facial expressions so that we can infer what the character feels like. So even getting students to think beyond just a written composition, they're using a they're composing what they're saying, they're composing what they're drawing. There's so many aspects to this because kids can go back and they can revise for details. They can go back and they can remove or add things in. They have to kind of plan out, what do they want? What do you want your reader to see? How do you want your words to match? Is there something that I want my reader to feel without seeing the words? There's a lot of thought that goes into that kind of composition as well.
So I want to back up when you look at composition to the student who doesn't feel like they have the ability to write. And I guess knowing what you know in your head and transferring it on paper can be a challenge. And so the idea of composing what you want to do, what your final product looks like, what Jonathan was referring to earlier, there are so many ways in which you can build an anchor, a foundation, so that you can successfully communicate what you want to your listener, to your reader. Myself, unless I talked it out, unless I made sense of it out loud speaking, I don't care if I recorded it or whatnot, I could not get a foundation for what I wanted, how I wanted to move my audience. And these kids or students or whatever they may be, depending on the audience that they are in front of, they can move them through technology, video recording, audio recording, and sometimes that will lend itself to composing something on paper that's worthwhile. And then they can see, because they can hear it visually or see it, that, well, that's not the angle or the slant that I wanted to take. Let me bring that back and let me recompose something that is something more beneficial to the audience whom I want to reach. That's the biggest thing with composing, that it's going to open up kids' possibilities to what can I create and how do I understand myself best to get the audience to respond.
So what stands out to me, and John has kind of touched on, and you just kind of talked about, Kelly, is engaging idea, which is B2. So engaging idea takes me back to authentic from the introduction and influential from the craft. And it's about our kids again. It's not about the test that's coming up. It's not about what we want them to write. It's not about the books we love. It's about what is going to work for this student in this moment, in the way they want to learn to be what they want to be.
One thing that I'm struck by is to compose multiple texts, the critical thinking a student has to engage in order to decide what mode that they're going to work in. And I'm also struck by the idea that I want to really make sure, as I share the TEKS with teachers, is that you can't do strand 5 the way it's intended if you don't do strand 6 the way it's intended. Strand 5 tells us that we have to allow students to apply author's craft purposefully. If I, as the educator, am dictating the way that the student is going to compose the text, then I've taken their opportunity to apply author's craft away. So then I'm no longer holding to the intent of the standards. And so I think that that's going to be a really purposeful. If you don't allow students to do this part, then you're not allowing them to do parts of strand 5 as well.
And when we're looking at the multiple genre strand and we're looking at the author's purpose and craft strand, we're looking at what is the text doing to us as readers and thinkers. And Fisher and Frey asked this question: what does the text inspire you to do? And that brings us back to the author's purpose and craft, that they're making purposeful choices about what they're doing. And that's the thing that drives the creation of the genre. They chose that genre on purpose because that genre matched their message. It matched their purpose and it matched their passion. Why can't we let kids make those same choices? And perhaps the reasons we have kids that are writing drivel is because what we're asking them to write in that genre doesn't have anything to do with what they really need to say.
Prior to dissecting these new strands, I couldn't fully understand how do I teach writing. I mean, and perhaps that comes down to maybe the education that I've had that writing, I just couldn't ever put what I was thinking, what I was processing, what I was hearing, what I was talking about onto paper. So now that we're deconstructing these new strands, I'm able to truly make that connection that there's a purpose to listening, speaking, reading, writing, and thinking. It's step-by-step process. And if the child does not achieve one, you can't move on to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. So what I just really realized was that all the standards, they correlate together. It's like an ongoing revolving door. The process is ongoing, and the composition is created through that opening revolving door across all standards within the new TEKS.